Sepulveda Boulevard, it begins at the intersection with Rinaldi in Mission Hills.
Yes.
Right by Fred Mertz and Lenny Bruce's graves.
Mm-hmm.
Their joint grave.
Their joint grave. It's just cheaper that way.
Their mass grave that all comedians get thrown into when they die. But there's some controversy as the actual length of this street, in my opinion. So if
Which is the only opinion that matters.
There's that chemistry. The chemistry I have with the rest of the world. So if you follow Sepulveda Boulevard...
Boulevard.
If you follow it to where it ends, it goes all the way through the valley, through the Sepulveda Pass, past Westwood, past the airport, and all the way down to near Hermosa Beach, ending at Artesia Boulevard, which is 31.1 miles later, where it then morphs into the PCH. The whole trip would take about 1 hour and 5 minutes without traffic. There's always traffic.
There's always traffic. So you're saying 4 hours?
If you're lucky. You might just want to fly.
Because once you pass... through the valley is wide, and then once it passes through Westwood, it becomes incredibly narrow and frustrating.
Yeah, and everyone's taking it to avoid the 405 as well.
And then all you've done is make another lane of the 405 that has stops.
That somehow takes more time, but you always go on it.
Yeah, you always try it.
Ending at Artesia Boulevard, that's the way I see it, but apparently people like to connect it to where Sepulveda reappears a little further south near Palos Verdes Boulevard, near the Del Amo Mall, which goes east all the way to just before the 103 in Long Beach.
Wow, okay.
So those people say that Sepulveda is actually 42.8 miles long because of this extra stretch. But I don't know why you would count that, because it literally ends for several miles and then reappears somewhere else unconnected.
That doesn't count.
No, it doesn't. Like, your two Chevy Chases aren't.
I don't
God
count
forbid
them.
There's two Chevy Chases. Sure, it's a great story to say you can drive from Mission Hills to Long Beach on the same street, but you can. You can drive there on streets.
I'm just as impressed that you can drive from Mission Hills to Hermosa Beach.
Yeah, no. Did I say Hermosa?
I
did say Hermosa.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing about me, is I'm such an active listener, and I'm so kind.
Yes, and.
Yes and no.
Yes, and stop talking. It is still pretty cool that it can go that far.
Yeah.
But either count, Sepulveda is the longest street in Los Angeles. It is.
Are you sure?
Think of one and I'll tell you.
Figueroa.
No.
You're kidding.
I even looked up Wilshire, and it's maybe 20 miles long, and that goes from like the ocean to past downtown.
I thought Figueroa went pretty south. All right. I'll have to believe you.
Well, yes.
Yes, you will.
Look, we'll look up how long Figueroa is, but everything I kept reading said Sepulveda is the longest, Sepulveda is the longest.
No, just talking about even on the freeway, those two areas you pointed out are far.
Yeah, it's
so
really
if it's
far.
a street that connects the two, then yeah, I imagine it's... Well, it's in the valley. It doesn't count. Go ahead.
You have to cut off the parts that are in the valley. So, longest street in Los Angeles, undisputed. But why Sepulveda? Why not longest road in the city boulevard? Why not Sepulveda?
I don't even have words.
Sepulveda actually existed before he appeared in the Star Wars universe. Did you know that? He's from Ireland.
The Ballad of Sepulveda. We all know that old ballad, right?
So let's get back into who Sepulveda was. I keep wanting to say Sepulveda now.
Don't.
Let's get back to who Sepulveda was, or rather, who Sepulveda were. And to do that, we've got to go way back to the almost beginning. Fade in on a sleepy, almost Pueblo town. That's something we haven't said in a while.
No, we haven't. We haven't had a fade back that far in a while.
Yeah. I was telling you this one podcast wanted to interview me about our show, and in the thing, they're like, so what are some of your running jokes on the show? And I had to, on an awkward three-way phone call, explain, oh, well, we like to say that things got turned into bullets during World War II, and that fire purifies things, and they never called me back.
You kind of have to be there.
That's what I should have just said.
You should have just said, you kind of have to listen, because me trying to explain it is the least funny thing.
Yeah. What's funnier than someone explaining an inside joke? Okay, so enter a long stream of people who keep naming their children the same name. So things are going to get very confusing very fast here. But it starts with a man named Francisco Xavier, back to the X-Men, Sepulveda. He was born in Sinaloa in 1742 and married a woman named Maria Candelaria de Redondo, and together they had 6 kids, eventually a 7th. Here's where the name starts. Juan Jose, Rafael, Sebastian, Jose Manuel, Maria Teresa, Francisco,
Sebastian too.
And Francisca.
Oh my God.
Francisco is already Francisco too.
Yeah. We need 3 Frankies in this family.
And 2 different iterations of Jose. And then Mother Teresa for some reason. Francisco Xavier was a soldier, and when he was 39, a group of settlers were planning to make a huge trip and relocate in the way north in Alta California. So being a soldier, Francisco was tasked with protecting this group and relocating relocating up north with his entire family. This was the first non-native settlement of the Los Angeles basin, and this group of people became known as the Pobladores. The Sepulveda family technically isn't considered one of the Pobladores because I guess they weren't part of that first group that went from the mission to downtown.
Oh.
But he was like 3 miles away. He was at, because there were two big groups that came to Mission San Gabriel.
It's like a technicality then.
Yeah, and then like 44 of the 88 or whatever came first to what became the Pueblo, and those were the Pobladores. He's like Poblados.
Poblador adjacent.
Pobladorks. That's what they called. That's what the first group called the second group.
I got it. It took them all day. It took them all day writing and drafting.
Trust me, I know how to write puns. It takes a while. So head of the family, Francisco, died on January 24th, 1788, and was buried at Mission San Gabriel. But like I said, he had a ton of kids. His two important kids, though, the two biggest names of the direct offspring were Juan Jose and Francisco II, who became rich as cattle ranchers, and that gave them influence in the sleepy Pueblo City.
You phrased that so I don't think you got.
What did I say that's so funny?
They're as rich as cattle ranchers, but they got rich as cattle ranchers. But I heard it like, they're as rich as cattle ranchers.
Hey, who are the richest people in the country right now? There's Jeff Bezos, but ahead of him are all the cattleman family of Central California. So they were rich as cattle ranchers. Francisco II became a regidor of Los Angeles, which is basically like a council member, which they should still call them that. We should still use like the Spanish names for the alcalde, the regidors.
We should, because we still call ourselves Los Angeles.
And I've been meaning to talk to you about that. We should switch to the Angels, and only our government employees should have Spanish names. So then in 1825, Francisco II, the regidor, he was made acting alcalde, which means he was the acting mayor, and in 1828 was granted the land of Rancho San Vicente y Santa Monica Boulevard, which was 30,260 acres stretching from basically where Sepulveda is now in Westwood all the way to the ocean, and from the Sepulveda Pass down to Pico. So that all belonged to the Sepulveda family.
Yeah.
They were rich as cattle ranchers. But then in 1831, he participated in an uprising against the governor and was put in prison. But between just those two brothers, Juan Jose and Francisco II, and their own children, the Sepulveda family now owned ranchos of places you know. There's San Joaquin, Santiago de Santa Ana, Las Cienegas, San Vicente, La Bayona, San Rafael, La Sierra, Palos Verdes, Santa Barbara, and even some far down as San Diego, those are all titles of government workers. You don't want to mess with La Bayona.
She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, she's lost her children. She's going to cry at you.
I think you're confusing a couple different things, but it's fun.
I learned it on Duolingo.
I learned it in El Santo movies.
I learned it on Spanish-speaking Legends Duolingo. But one sticking point of their land was the Palos Verdes area. So this area was partially given to the Sepulvedas in 1827 by Governor Figueroa, the not longest street.
Longest street. But that's his first name.
In 1827, this area was partially given to them, but it was also partially given to the Dominguez family. So the rights over all of it led to a decades-long feud between the Sepulvedas and the Dominguezes, but all the feuding was done over legal matters, so it was like the Hatfields and McCoys, but if it was just Matlock.
If they got their lawyers to fight.
I choose my finest lawyer to go up against yours. Like, it was a serious feud between these two families, but all it was like, I'll see you in court again. Jose Dolores Sepulveda, who is Juan Jose's son, built a house in 1818 at what is now Madison and Courtney in Torrance, but he decided to go up north to Monterey in 1824 to try to settle this land dispute once and for all. But when he got to the Mission La Purísima Concepcion in Lompoc, he arrived just when an uprising of the Chumash were revolting against the mission, and he got shot and killed by an arrow by a Chumash soldier or warrior, I guess. That's how that guy died. So
what's going on here? And that was the last thing.
Oh, are you putting on a play?
Oh, no.
So the dispute still wasn't settled. His kids were Maria Teresa, again, Ignacio Rafael, Jose Diego, Jose Laredo, and Juan Capistrano. And those last two, Jose Laredo and Juan Capistrano, were on that Palos Verdes land, San Pedro really, on August 6th, 1846, when they spotted a warship. Those two, they spotted a warship off the coast. Turns out this was the warship of Robert Stockton, who was about to invade Los Angeles and claim it for the United States. So those two Sepulveda boys immediately ran to General Castro, who was in charge of the Mexican troops in LA, who heard the news and immediately fled to Mexico.
God.
And on August 13th, Stockton marched in and took the city of Los Angeles for the United States without having to fire a shot because the army abandoned the city.
I've got an idea. It's in Mexico.
They've got boats? How are we going to fight them on land against boats?
I've been shooting a boat for an hour. Nothing's happening. I know my gun only shoots one bullet at a time. It's kind of just like a high-powered BB
Yeah,
gun.
we could shoot one bullet a day. So the Sepulveda boys were the first ones to see the
That's
Americans
so crazy.
invading. A month later, though, there was an uprising that drove Stockton's troop back out of L.A. onto their boat off of San Pedro, and it was the Sepulvedas who were in charge of keeping an eye on them to make sure they didn't, and stay out. That was their motto.
and
that was the
stay out.
family crest of Sepulveda. And it's a raised fist with shake wiggles around it. The other son, their brother, Ignacio Rafael, meanwhile, was one of the soldiers fighting against of this uprising. But on January 9th, 1847, he was killed in the Battle of La Mesa in Montebello against the U.S. troops. Then in 1858, that San Pedro land dispute was finally resolved, and it was decided that the land did in fact belong to the Sepulvedas. But by that point, there had been some bad investments in the family and gambling issues, and then more land disputes trying to prove they owned it once again, but this time to the U.S. government.
Right.
So the legal drama never ended. Then between 1862 to 64, there was a drought that wiped out most of the Sepulveda cattle, and the family was deeply in debt.
As poor as cattle farmers.
Oh, it's a double-edged horn. They started selling parts of their land, and other parts were foreclosed. Between 1865 and 1880, they were involved in 78 lawsuits, 6 land partition suits, and 12 squatter eviction suits. Some of the members of this once mighty LA family were now dying poor as a cattle rancher with no money at all, just cow pies to eat for dinner. Then on September 25th, my birthday, 1882, my birth year, the Rancho Palos, I had to be born early so I could get a good seat for W.C. Fields' movie.
It was packed house.
Yeah, I was lining up for 50 years to see It's a Gift. The Rancho Palos Verdes land dispute was settled once and for all, and the land was divided into 17 parts with only 4,411 acres given to the Sepulvedas, which was one of the smallest partitions from this suit. It was given mostly to Americans. So at this point, the era of the almost royalty Sepulvedas was over, but all the confusing branches of the family were still making their impacts in other ways around town. Jose Laredo, who was one of the brothers who saw Stockton's ship, he became mayor in 1837 and then again in 1839 when there were 2 mayors of Los Angeles, him and a guy named Tiburcio Tapia, which led to the abolishment of the position of mayor, and instead for a while the city was run by 2 justices of peace. Yeah, it's very weird. One of which was Jose Laredo again in 1842 because they elected new people every single year, which probably should still happen. Then in 1844 they changed it again back to having a mayor, but now there would always be 2 mayors. So there was like mayor and vice mayor.
Double dragon.
If you slay one more will take my place. But if you slay him, the city's fall. I'm running to Mexico. Yeah. In 1845, the other brother, Juan Capistrano, was second alcalde mayor. And then in 1846 and 48, it was Jose Laredo again as vice mayor. Then from 1853 to 54, Juan Maria, who was one of the sons of Francisco II, his wife's name was Jesus.
Okay, I'm into it. Sure.
If I got the chance to marry Jesus, I would take it. He was elected to the Los Angeles Common Council. Then from 1857 to 58, he was the county assessor. Then there was Ignacio, who honestly I have no idea whose kid he is, but he was a judge, and in 1879 he was made the first superior judge of LA County. Judge Ignacio Sepulveda. He had also been on the first Los Angeles Public Library governing board in 1872. He probably got that database started.
Yeah, he
predicted the internet
before LA Times even started. He's like, there's got to be...
Rich as a database inventor. And in 1895, he became the first Secretary of the United States to Mexico, appointed by President Grover Cleveland.
Wow.
Judge Ignacio Sepulveda. His daughter was also friends with the Hearst family. His reputation's tarnished now. So this is the general overview of the famous Sepulveda family, who were one of the major families to shape the city, and they just had their fingers in everything, everywhere. Cows here.
Yeah, cows, other cows.
The mayor here. The naming of the street, however, seems to be in direct reference to Fernando Domingo Sepulveda, who was one of the sons of Francisco II, grandson of the first Francisco, who was a poblador.
It's weird because as you were telling the story, I lost sight. I assumed that it was named after the entire family's legacy.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought also, but apparently it's just this one guy.
Yeah,
it's this one guy who I didn't even mention here because there's nothing significant about him, but maybe he had a house there or something.
The significant thing is that he has a street named after him.
It was a self-fulfilling, it was like a Kim Kardashian sort of self-perpetuating thing. Sepulveda used to be called Saugus Avenue, but in 1925 they renamed it Sepulveda Boulevard. And
because the word Saugus, it just makes everyone upset. Yeah. It's just a gross word to say.
It makes everyone lose their appetite. And in 1927 they also named a part of the Valley Sepulveda after this same particular particular Sepulveda. But in 1991, they changed that name of the part of the valley to North Hills. But the Sepulveda family is still around town, and not just with the last name Sepulveda, with all the marriages and stuff. There's the Beegler family in Burbank, the Chapmans, Valdez, Ruiz, Smith, Ballard, Bacon. So anyone you know with these last names could be a descendant of local royalty, or even you could be, dear boy. But no finer words were ever spoken about Sepulveda Boulevard than in the song Sepulveda by the King's Jester from 1946, which is, I'll post this song. It's really good. That says, Sepulveda, it's a concrete dream, kumquats and cream, where the Sunday drivers meet, which I only assume is about the sex workers.
It has to be about sex work. Or even like the parts of town where men will pull up in cars together.
You mean when men will pull up in cars together and record podcasts?
Yeah, like that. You know exactly what I'm talking about.